Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome back to the APAC Manufacturing Conclave. From morning, we have some interesting sessions from the senior government policymakers, from industry solution providers, then very exciting panel discussion on FMCG companies. And now we are joined for another exciting session. We are joined by Anirudh Iyer. He is the enterprise sales head, Mendix of the Siemens Digital Industries Software. So Siemens, as a manufacturing solution provider, needs no further reintroduction. We know this German giant has been a pioneering name in manufacturing for a lot of time. And today's session by Anirudh will be on accelerating digitalization for manufacturing with Mendix. Mendix, incidentally, Siemens low code and multi experience platform. Uh, you would all be knowing that low code is the in thing today in the development community. And we would like to hand it over to Anirudh to take us through his solutions, through his presentation and certain video. And I'm sure of the 300 plus audience who are witnessing this show, this will be a great and novel experience. Over to you, Anirudh.
Thank you very much, Rajneesh ji. And hello and good afternoon to the audience here. I'm glad you could take the time out for this session to hear about how low code can be a very fundamental and pivotal technology for you to execute on your digital transformation initiatives. So, without further ado, let me quickly get to the agenda for today's session and what we have in mind for the next half an hour for you today. I hope my screen is visible to all of you. Rajneesh, if you can just give me a thumbs up for that.
Yes, screen is visible.
Perfect, perfect. So as Rajnish had introduced me, I'm responsible for driving adoption of this low-code technology, which is one of the many software elements that we have in the Siemens Digital Industries Software portfolio. Right? And in terms of today's session, what we had in mind is we wanted to start with maybe a broader perspective on the whole digital transformation journey, which I'm sure many of you IT leaders are presently embarking on. And what are the options available to you in terms of technologies that can help you execute on the roadmap that you have? We also wanted to talk about how low code as a technology can be a very strong contender to actually help you execute on that roadmap and how it actually compares with the certain other technologies out there. And also wanted to drill down into the low code category. As you may be aware, it's a very, very broad category with several hundred vendors out there. Understanding which is the right technology or the platform for you, depending on your requirements, is something that is very important. So we thought we'd shed some light on that as well. Wanted to also spend some time on what could be some of the key considerations that you should look at while you select the right platform that you want to use for digital execution. And lastly, towards the end, depending on how much time we have, I will also run you through some examples of applications that have been built using Mendix in a very short span of time. Right? Mendix being one of the low-code platforms. And I wanted to start, like I said, with the context around digital transformation. And this is based on some inputs that were sought through an analyst agency, through one of the research that they did, right? By interviewing various IT leaders. And as many of you will be aware, digital transformation is a journey where you start from a certain point and essentially seek to build out various digital solutions that help you digitize and automate various internal processes, but also help you digitally interface with stakeholders across your value chain, right? People inside as well as outside your organization, customers, dealers, distributors, and even suppliers. And generally, some of the challenges that organizations have encountered, right, in terms of achieving this objective of transformation or executing this objective is one is that they find a lot of the core IT systems that they presently have in their landscape, which even could include systems like an ERP system or a CRM system or a DMS, right? They are not really flexible enough to actually digitize and automate a lot of specific processes that are currently there in your IT landscape, right? Second could be around how you need multi-channel capability and support for various different types of devices in terms of accessing applications. Classic example is where mobility solutions, including mobile applications as well as applications to be accessed on tablets, desktops, through web as well as mobile, are being sought more and more, right? Third aspect, which was highlighted as one of the key concern areas, was around integration across the IT landscape. So, with most mature enterprises, you will find that you have various systems, including the systems of record, like ERPs, like LIMS, like MES, like CRM. But you also have a lot of peripheral applications lying around, and also data in Excel, right, which invariably happens because of shadow IT reasons. And the ability to integrate and merge across these different data points is something that is very, very crucial. Again, not an easy task to achieve, right? And last and not the least is around how requirements go on evolving. So it is not a scenario where a defined set of requirements are given to you and a system can support that and things just stay the way they are, right? Business constantly seeks new changes to the applications depending on the business scenario. COVID triggering a lot of changes is a classic example. So this is broadly the context, and in order to actually address some of these digital solution requirements, organizations typically look at three options, right, in terms of building out the applications and solutions required. They will typically either turn to COTS, commercial off-the-shelf offerings. Alternatively, they might in some cases look at pro code, which is essentially building customizations using the traditional frameworks like a Java or a .NET. And as a third option, which is now being considered, is low code development, right, as a way to achieve faster time to market. Now, this particular research report claims that the low code is something, it's an option, or rather, building versus buying something is an option that is more and more being considered by organizations. To be honest, at least in the India context, where I have spoken to more than 100 IT leaders, my experience has been that there is still a preference, or IT leaders still lean more towards buying solutions if possible, and then looking at other options if an alternative is available, right? And if I look at the options available, COTS, of course, gives you something which can be customized, provided there is a defined set of requirements. Coding itself is not always considered a favorable option because it can actually entail a lot of effort and time elapsed in terms of actually building out the solution, right? Doing something from scratch. Low code, again, is not something that is commonly considered, reason being that there is a perception that low code is something that can only cater to relatively simple requirements, right? And this is based on the first glance, right, that a lot of organizations get based on the first low code platform that they see, which is typically one that is made available through any of the enterprise vendor of a system that you're currently using. Could be an ERP system, could be your suite of office software, it could be anything else. So there is a perception against low code saying that it is something which is typically suitable only for relatively simple internal facing applications. The moment you need to use it as a part of an overall digital transformation journey, it is not something that can cater to the complex requirements. And this is a perception that we are trying to change. And this is where I will shed some light on how this may be true in some cases, but there are certain platforms out in the market that can actually enable you to build all kinds of applications, including very, very complex business critical ones. And this is where I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about low code as a category, right? Low code, like I mentioned, has several hundred vendors out there. But if you actually drill down into it, you will find that there are distinct types of low code players that emerge, right? Many low code vendors out there typically come with some kind of an orientation which is aligned with the kind of technology that they used to providing. So if you think about it, a lot of ERP vendors nowadays, right, they have low code platforms. And these low code platforms do a reasonably good job of allowing you to build extensions to those specific ERP systems along those domains. The moment you need to look at requirements outside of the domains for which that particular vendor is known for, you will find that the platforms don't necessarily cater or don't are not flexible enough to cater to those set of requirements. Classic example is where you might have a CRM vendor with a low code offering, but the moment you want to build apps on the manufacturing side, you will find that these platforms don't necessarily have the tool sets, right, in place to, for example, connect to an IoT platform or connect to an RFID reader. Likewise, there are also other platforms out there which fall in the what we call the no code category. No code essentially refers to a lot of platforms that allow you to build applications without writing a single line of code, which again works very well in the context of building relatively simple applications using predefined templates. The moment you want to build more sophisticated applications and you need the flexibility, to actually write some code in some cases or build some complex logic, you will find that the no code platforms don't necessarily deliver on those. And very broadly, that leaves us with another third category, which is what we call pure play low code platforms. Pure play low code platforms are ones that have not come from any particular perspective in terms of their DNA, right? They are not aligned to any business function, they are not aligned to any industry, they are not aligned to a particular tech stack. They come from the perspective that we should allow any organization to implement any type of use case, whether it be around a plant maintenance cycle or whether it be around making some kind of a system available to dealers, distributors, stockists, or anybody else in your sell side ecosystem. And out of these, there are only very few platforms that are actually mature enough to be able to build fairly complex business critical applications. And that is where, if you look at the Gartner quadrant, right, in a conjunction of two criteria, one, of course, is low code, the other one, of course, is multi experience, which refers to the ability to build multi channel applications that can be used on web as well as mobile using the leading frameworks like PWA as well as mobile native. You'll find there are only very few platforms out there that can be truly enterprise grade in terms of allowing you to execute on very complex requirements across the spectrum of applications. And that is where a platform like Mendix, for example, comes into play, right? And that's the reason it has been considered a leader leading up to this year and for many years in this space itself. And I'll give you a few examples of what can be done using the more mature platforms. But just to reiterate, the point I want to make here is that if you are looking at low code, particularly for critical business transformation initiatives, it is very important to look at the mature end of the spectrum when it comes to low code. That is when you will truly realize value from looking at the platforms in the context of your roadmap and your use cases. A very quick summary of what the value proposition is of low code in general. So typically, these are three value drivers the way we look at it, right? This is something that will appeal to any of you IT leaders or CXOs, the first, or even the business for that matter, right? So one critical aspect that low code brings to the table is faster time to market. Any application, let us say, that typically takes something in the span of 3 to 4 months to build with a couple of people, with, developing maybe a regular PMO setup, can potentially take half the time or less if you were to use a mature low code platform, right? And that has, of course, got a strong implication for the business as well. Essentially, business will be able to use the application many months earlier, which means they can potentially monetize that application as well, right? Either in terms of potential top line growth if it is a sell side application, or even in terms of cost savings if it is an operational efficiency type application. So the ability for business to get their hands on an application faster can have a very significant impact on the business. Second aspect is around application velocity. Again, it has to do with the volume of applications that you can deliver. Traditional frameworks, while they do give you the flexibility to build any type of app, there is a constraint in terms of how many applications you can deliver, considering that there is a certain amount of time and effort that goes into building applications, right? And there's only so many resources that you have available to build apps. Even if you take some from your system integrator, it is not that you can you know have your system integrator provide more than 50 to 100 resources to manage a certain set of applications, right? There will be a constraint there. The benefit of low code is that low code actually democratizes the whole app development process, which basically means that it is not something that is limited to pro developers anymore. Low code can also be used to build applications by what we call citizen developers or business users. You will find that people like business analysts or even end users in some cases can actually build or in some cases maintain some of the low complexity to mid complexity applications themselves without having to turn to the IT organization for every small requirement. And particularly, this is true in the case of change requests, right? In case there's a new feature, a small tweak, or a change to be made to the user interface, the application logic, business stakeholders themselves can understand things like a BPMN notation, and they can manage some of these changes themselves rather than having to go to IT for everything. So that is where you will find that the number of solutions that essentially get turned around in your landscape will be much more. All this, of course, happens with the governance and control of the IT organization. Third impact, which is again very relevant from a digital and an IT organization standpoint, is that there is a lot of efficiencies you will realize from the use of low code platforms. So typically, what takes, let's say, a few hundred days worth of man days worth of effort to build an application, if you reduce that by half, the kind of resources you need to leverage from your SI partners or tier two partners or even internally reduces quite a bit. And subsequently, that has an impact on the cost as well, right? And another aspect from a cost perspective is that because some of these mature platforms tend to be cloud native in terms of architecture, you can leverage cloud infrastructure and even a managed infrastructure offering in a lot of cases. So the investments you make on infrastructure and managing that also reduces. So even from a cost standpoint, from an IT operations perspective, you will find that there is a significant benefit of using low-code platforms. Right? Now, what I want to do is getting back to the point that we made earlier. It is important to think about what are the criteria that you need to consider when you actually look at low-code platforms. Like I mentioned, there are many, many vendors out there, some of which might get ticks in some boxes, but ideally you want ticks in as many boxes as possible in terms of functionalities, right? Rich functionalities that allow you to build enterprise-grade applications. And this is just a very not a comprehensive list as such, but this is a crisp summary of some of the key criteria that you might want to consider. The first most important thing is around the ability to integrate and essentially have leverage data across your IT landscape. Invariably, a lot of the applications that you build, they will have to align with business processes, which means that they will require integration with various IT systems in your landscape. Could be an ERP, could be a module of an ERP, like a plant maintenance module, could be an MES system, an IoT system, a CRM system. Very often they need to talk to each other in order to build certain use cases, right? Which align with business requirements. Now, integration capability, either in the form of out-of-the-box connectors or support for any of these standard integration protocols, whether it be REST API based, SOAP, SOA, or even OData, is something that is very, very crucial. Second, very important point, again, from a process automation perspective, I would say is that the ability to build workflow based applications and basically orchestrate business processes is again a very, very crucial functionality in terms of building a lot of process improvement applications, which again you will find is a very integral part of digital transformation, right? You can think of the common workflow approval apps or apps that digitize and automate certain processes. Third aspect, which we believe is very important in terms of overall architecture, is the ability to leverage cloud to the fullest. By that, what we mean is that ideally you want a platform that gives you the best or most modern architecture in terms of cloud. Applications, of course, should be cloud native. Ideally, they should be full stack containerized applications, right, which leverage some of the leading technologies like Kubernetes. They should be ideally microservice oriented, where each module within an application or each element of an application itself can be consumed in the form of a service across your IT landscape. So that architecture aspect we believe is very, very important going forward from a scalability perspective, from a resilience perspective as well. Right. Another very crucial point, which again brings us back to the maturity aspect, is around what can your low-code platform support in terms of complexity, right? You don't want to end up in a situation where you take a low code platform and you do a little bit of low code development, but you end up having to write a lot of lines of code to actually build certain functionality which is not there or not supported by the low code platform. That is where it is very, very crucial that the platform that you select supports very strong capability to build complex logic, right? It should support not just the development of the application in terms of three layers, the data model, the logic, and the UI, but ideally also maybe support the entire application lifecycle in terms of project management, in terms of the whole DevOps process itself. So the support for the entire software development lifecycle for all apps ranging from simple to complex is very, very crucial. And this, if you ask me, is the most important criteria from all of these. Right? Moving forward, AI, of course, is something that you'll be incorporating into various solutions that you're rolling out for the businesses. AI also ideally should be a part of the platform itself, where the platform itself should have an AI ML based engine which can preempt or propose what is the next best course of action in terms of developing the application. And last but not the least, this is around multi channel app development. Like I mentioned earlier, nowadays the ask for mobility solutions, multi-channel applications that can be accessed on any device is growing, right? And very often you'll come across scenarios where business will ask for a mobile native application which can be published on an app store, but very often they might want to use the same application on the web as well, right? And ideally it should be web responsive. You should be able to access the application on a tablet, on a desktop, or even a cell phone. And essentially the user interface should not get affected significantly. Now, that support for the leading architectures when it comes to web as well as mobile applications is very crucial. And what you will find is that, again, if you look at the whole category of low code, right, there are only few platforms out there which fulfill a lot of these requirements. And I'm proud to be affiliated with Siemens here. So I will mention that Mendix, which is Siemens' low-code platform, actually gets a ticks in all these boxes, right? I wanted to quickly move to an example, a couple of examples, in fact, of scenarios and applications, and give you a sense of how quickly things can be developed using low code. And this, I believe, is a situation that we are all familiar with, which is, in the aftermath of COVID, I'm sure a lot of you have had to roll out applications related to COVID. And the workplace management application is a common app that you must have developed, right? And I'm sure you must have tried to develop in-house or potentially sought out solutions. But it's a very, very urgent requirement that had to be delivered, and time to market is a very crucial consideration. I'm going to show you, or actually play the video of an application that was built in a span of 2 weeks using the Mendix platform. So let me just quickly jump to that.
As an example to showcase this application, we've taken the office as the workplace. However, the application can be used in multiple industries at different locations, such as factories, hospitals, or even ships. As a manager, you can define the details of each office you want to manage using this application. You can specify its name, location details, and a thumbnail picture. For each office, the manager is also able to define all the available rooms, the days the office is closed, as well as the equipment resources such as monitors and projectors. When defining a room, the manager can add a visual representation of the office floor plan and use that to indicate which workspaces can be used by creating clickable workspaces with available equipment resources. Now that we have the offices, rooms, and equipment defined, we can switch to the next step, which is to have employees make a reservation. As an employee, using a mobile device, the user can create new or manage existing reservations. Be presented with a visual representation of all available spots. Picking and confirming the desired spot will finalize the reservation. Once arrived at the office, the employee can use the QR code scanner at the desk to register and confirm the reserved spot. An additional feature allows that same employee to see where co-workers will be seated on a specific date time and use that information
So I'll just pause here and just to reiterate, right, what the point I was making earlier. This is an example of a very urgent use case that must have cropped up, time to market being very crucial. And again, you have the options here, right, of either buying a COT solution, which may not have been there in the context of the first wave of COVID, if you think about it, building it using Pro Code, your traditional frameworks like Java, .NET, which easily would have run into more than 2 months, which would not have been acceptable for the business, right? And of course, the third option is low code, where you actually see the value delivered in a very short span of time. I also wanted to run you through another very quick example. I believe we are a little short on time though, so let me get back to where I was. Another important aspect, again, when we think about low code, there could be reservations around do we have to build everything from scratch, right? That can be a question mark, and that is where it also helps to have some functional accelerators which are relevant from a manufacturing as well as an R&D perspective. Again, if you look at what the Siemens and Mendix are doing together, while we do have a lot of robust functionalities in terms of building applications from scratch, there are also a lot of solution templates that we're coming out with for common use cases which you find from a manufacturing perspective around areas like plant maintenance, quality inspection, warehouse management, which could be extensions to SAP. In fact, SAP happens to be a solution extension partner as well. So having some functional accelerators in place also helps, and that is maybe another consideration that you can look at in terms of identifying the right low-code platform that fits your bill. So very quickly to summarize, since we have about a minute or two left, while traditionally there have been a lot of conception about low code not being mature enough to deliver on a digital transformation journey which can span many years and has a high level of complexity, what I would like to reiterate is that you will find there are a few platforms out there in the market that can still serve the purpose, and in the long run it can be a very cost effective and very worthy business case for you to consider in terms of having one platform that caters to multiple requirements rather than having several core solutions or having a landscape of applications which are heavily customized, which becomes very difficult to manage in the long run. So that is my concluding thought, and hope to hear back from all of you. I'll just quickly put up my coordinates on the screen. You can feel free to reach out to me regarding any discussion or exploration that you would like to have, and look forward to interacting with you. Hope you had an insightful session.
Thanks, Anirudh. Thanks. That was a very interactive and useful session for the attendees, and also, as we mentioned, those who watched live. Plus, this video will be on the YouTube, and we'll be promoting it. So, who will watch it later also? So, I'm sure it will be very informative. Thanks again, Anirudh, and we just like to. I'll just request the organizers. Okay, so we will send you a token of appreciation over mail for your participation in the program, and best wishes for you. And I hope that you are able to join in for the subsequent sessions. Thanks, Anirudh.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Rajni and team, for orchestrating this whole thing. And I will be there for the sessions that are coming up. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you
Thank
once
you.
again to the audience. Have a good day.